All right. We already had someone in the comments because they saw my headline about how Tucker Carlson is a demon. And boy, are they going to be disappointed. Because this is, I think Tucker Carlson might be the most morally honest person in journalism today, in mainstream journalism anyway. And obviously he's not in mainstream journalism anymore. But I think I'm going to show you some clips from this interview he did with Dave Smith. And I definitely want you to go watch the whole thing because it blew me away. But a lot of people don't realize that Tucker Carlson was a deadhead. Tucker Carlson was literally a deadhead. So he's taken acid before. He's taken psychedelics. So he has that perspective that a lot of people don't. And I think it was Russell on talking about this the other day, and it might have been on Jimmy Dore or their stream, but he was talking about how a lot of people, to get into these 3-letter agencies, you can't have ever smoked a joint or taken psychedelic drugs or anything like that. So you don't have that perspective. And that's why a lot of the people in these worlds are such automatons who just like, yes, whatever, I will do whatever power tells me to do. And, people who ingest mind-altering drugs don't usually end up that way. So anyway, I want to show you this clip from this interview that Tucker did with Dave Smith. And this is such a great clip because they document the trajectory of anti-war conservatives. Now, I want to start by saying Dave Smith here is a big Ron Paul fan, which I was a big Ron Paul fan. And if you're a Bernie person, you remember that Ron Paul's campaign was almost kind of like the foundation for Bernie's success later on, because what they did with Ron Paul is they would do these money bombs right before the filing deadlines, and Ron Paul would come out on top because he would raise all these small donations through the internet, through his rabid followers on the internet, and he would, like, the news would have to go like, oh my God, Ron Paul was like the #1 fundraiser this quarter, and that was when I think the political realm realized their strength in numbers, and has that progressed, and eventually Trump was elected president. That's why social media and that kind of organizing is being, censored at every opportunity. First over, misinformation from COVID, then over misinformation from Russia, now over, misinformation from what's going on in the Middle East, and you name it. But watch this clip of Tucker and Dave basically documenting the trajectory of the anti-war conservative.
Very interesting to me, and is the role you've kind of played in this. I mean, the role obviously it's a feedback loop too. So it's like there's this big realignment. There's been a big kind of transformation in our country over the last few years. Obviously, the most stark example of it is, say, looking at, say, 2004, the Republican presidential, ticket versus Donald Trump in 2016, standing up there and telling Jeb Bush, your brother lied us into war in South Carolina at the Republican primary, and then winning, dominating the next day at the poll, at the voting. And, you've been a big part of this, where it was kind of shocking for a while that the 8 p.m. hour at Fox News, and the top rated show in all of cable news, was the most anti-war voice in the corporate media. And this was, for someone like me, like I'm 40, and so I was like a young adult during and I lived in New York City during 9/11 and the war on terror years. I think for sometimes like younger guys, they don't kind of appreciate how crazy of a transformation that was. And so it's kind of interesting that I think Donald Trump and you, I would say, are probably the two biggest figures that kind of gave the right half of America permission to re-examine some of this stuff. Like it's not making you Michael Moore anymore to do it. You could just be kind of like Tucker Carlson or Donald Trump,
Well, I think the slur was, and it was rooted in truth probably, is if you were against American military, the projection of American military force, you were against America. You didn't have self-confidence. You were personally probably a pussy, but you.
It's so true. It's so true. They made you feel like you were a wimpy bitch if you were against the Iraq war.
You also didn't believe in your country or its ideals or its foreign projects. And I mean, I certainly trust me, I employed that slur on TV. I mean, I was in TV since I was in my mid 20s, so I had a lot of years of repeating these slogans, which were completely false, and I just wasn't self-aware enough to know that what I was doing. But the point is, 20 years ago this week, weirdly, I went to Iraq in the winter of 2003, and I won't be boring, but I'll just say in one sentence, that completely changed my view of everything, because it turned out what I had been claiming, espousing, hoping for was all totally false. And so that set off a chain reaction in my head. And by the time I got back to Washington, where I lived, my views had completely changed. I mean, it was inchoate at that point. I wasn't exactly sure what I believed, but I know what I didn't believe,
what he says
which was everything I had been saying. And I said this out loud and immediately lost, an awful lot of friends who took it much.
That's the point when Tucker Carlson became a demon, when he became the devil that he's known as today in the media, in the mainstream media.
More seriously than I thought they would, and who were not interested in intellectual inquiry or thinking really at all. They were very lockstep Stalinists, and I didn't know that. I don't know how I'd been living among these people. Some of them were very bright.
I would use Stalinists, but okay.
But I just didn't get it. And some of them truly hated me, and to this day hate me, just because I reassessed on the basis of evidence. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I always leave open that possibility, but I mean, why would you be anyway, whatever. So that
you got to respect that too, saying maybe I'm wrong. It takes a lot of there aren't many people in the political world today that would ever say that, ever.
For me, for like 20 years, I didn't feel like anyone agreed with me. But Trump made it possible to make the case, hey, this isn't good for us. I'm against foreign adventurism. I'm against the neocon program because I love America. I live here. My kids live here. I don't want to wreck it. He made that case. No one had ever done that before. And I mean, that was the moment. You're right. It was that South Carolina debate, and all the dumb people on TV, political reporters, the dumbest of all reporters, because it's the easiest reporting. You just recite poll numbers and cliches. They were all I was on the set when that happened. They're like, oh, well, he just lost South Carolina. And the checks notes, South Carolina is the highest percentage of military veterans of any state, and they're going to hate this. And it turns out to be, of course, the mirror image. Military veterans who'd had their lives destroyed or at least put on hold by these totally pointless wars were the most on Trump's side.
Yeah.
And so I never thought about that, but that was the point. He won South Carolina after he shot down Jeb Bush over the 9/11 stuff. That was like the Ron Paul moment. Ron Paul did something similar in the 2012 debate. He was booed for basically saying that 9/11 was blowback. But watch this other clip of Tucker, because this is one of my favorites. I mean, he sums it up right here.
American culture and Western culture. We haven't produced meaningful art at scale since 1945. Everything we produced in architecture, visual arts, music is a little different. I think we have created innovative music in that time, but certainly in the visual arts and architecture, it's just been pure shit since 1945. Really, 1945. Something changed at a very basic level in Western culture. And what is that? I thought.
And it's funny how every time we have a war effort in the United States, it's framed through those glasses, through the World War II glasses. We're the good Allied forces and everyone else is a Nazi.
But we won. Why would it destroy our creative impulse? But it did. And why is there not a serious inquiry into that? I don't understand. I don't understand.
Right here.
There's this old Adams quote, and man, I'm going to butcher it, but he said it's something like, if we go around the world searching for wars, we'll become the dictatoress of the world, but we will lose our own soul.
That's right.
And there's something about that, right? Happening right away. Okay, here's the trade. It's like this. Here's the trade.
If you don't think we've lost our soul, look at what's going on in the Middle East right now.
Empire for your soul. And that's kind of the deal. And then, of course, that's after World War II springs up the whole, what we know as the national security apparatus today, the creation of the CIA and kind of this whole.
But it's also, it does affect us on the level of our souls. I mean, you should not commit violence except in extraordinary circumstances related to your self-defense. And that's true in your own home. Your wife pisses you off. You shouldn't punch her in the face. That's grotesque. It's a crime. And
listen to that. What an evil man he is.
The idea that you sort of wave away civilian casualties or even military casualties as no big deal or the cost of doing business or something we should celebrate is disgusting. And I don't care. Look, I hated Osama bin Laden. He killed 3,000 of my countrymen, including someone I know. But when he was killed, it's like, I'm glad the threat is gone, but I'm not going to celebrate the shooting of another person. And I don't care not because he didn't.
I'm not going to celebrate the shooting of another person. That's the point I tried to make when Ashley Babbitt was shot during the January 6th thing. And so many liberals who were against police brutality and police violence against black people and cops being a judge, jury, and executioner cheered that shooting because they were so propagandized that was, some crazy attempt to overthrow them. Anyway, January 6th was safe and effective.
Deserve to die. He did deserve to die, but because celebrating people getting shot is bad for me. And if you have an entire country that's like, oh yeah, we, burn down this city and that's great. No. You should never celebrate violence or you will become a monster. It's super simple. And that's all through the Old Testament, by the way. Everyone's like, oh, the Old Testament's so violent. Really? David, who committed a lot of violence, spends all of his time talking about, oh man, violence is bad. People who commit violence know how bad it is. Talk to someone who shot someone else in war. They're very against violence for a reason. And when we're celebrating it nationally as a culture, I think we've really lost something important.
100%.
There you have it. The most evil man in cable news, Tucker Carlson, just laying it out for you. Why he's such an evil person. It's evidence, this comment I got earlier about Tucker Carlson is just evidence of how well the propaganda of the last, 5 to 10 years has worked to completely zombify a large portion of the population. You don't even have to listen to anything Tucker Carlson ever says. John Oliver, I don't know if you remember this. I remember this very clearly. It was when I lost a lot of respect for John Oliver. He did an entire piece about how Tucker is a white supremacist racist. And I like some of John Oliver's work too. I think the stuff he does on his show is great. A lot of it. He does a lot of great exposés that people, exposes a lot of problems that I don't think people outside of his audience would ever see. And I think he does a good job. But, that's someone who I trusted acting like Tucker Carlson is some demon. And when you listen to the guy talk and he says things like that, you realize, wow, I was completely lied to about this person.